Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you, and welcome back to Morning Musings here on Now TV. Now, as you almost undoubtedly know, Now TV had some major problems with their server. It just went completely down. Uh, I'm not sure that my numbering of my videos and the dating of my videos is exactly accurate, but I just wanted to make sure we've got video to share with you so that we don't completely lose track as a result of that server being down. And I appreciate the kind words from Now TV uh, and their offers for us for some credit and all that kind of stuff. They've been very good, very nice to deal with, and we do appreciate that very much. So I hope this gets played on the right date. In other words, and even though the dating on the heading may be wrong. So anyway, great to be back with you. Now, since the last video that I produced was actually aired, or excuse me, actually produced before my debate with Dr. Richard Carrier, um, I want to share just a few moments here. I won't take up a lot of time because I've already done a review of the debate. My personal review, it's on Morning Musings. You can go back and look at that on my impression of the debate. Um, Michael Sullivan and I did a 1 hour review of the debate on preterist apologetics. You can find that on YouTube. And then William Bell and I did um, a review of the debate as well. So there's no sense in me, no need for me to go into that extensively. But if you do not watch my regular morning musings, then you may not be aware of how that debate went. Many people have asked me, contacted me, so Don, how do you think it went? And I said, quite honestly, I don't think it could have gone any better. That's not brag, that's a fact. Because I knew exactly how Dr. Carrier was going to approach the debate. He was going to approach the debate with the presupposition and with the claim and argument that Jesus shared the common Jewish expectation concerning the coming of the Lord, judgment, resurrection, and kingdom, as did the first century Jews. Since the Jews expected a literalistic, materialistic, nationalistic restoration of the Davidic kingdom that would come at the time of the defeat of the Romans, and since that obviously didn't happen, even though Jesus predicted that it would, then this proves that Jesus lied or he failed. Now, this was his very first, this was on his first chart, his first argument. Now, again, I anticipated that. I knew that was fundamental to his position. But I also knew, and I had a chart prepared, I also knew that that argument is absolutely, categorically false. Jesus did not share the common Jewish expectation of the kingdom, the nature of the kingdom, and the nature of the coming of Messiah at the end of the age. He flat rejected this. Now, as proof of that, and again, I had a chart, and what I'm going to do, I had intended to do it before now, and I just simply got tied up. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my PowerPoint presentation that I used in my opening remarks, in my opening presentation. I'm going to put my PowerPoints on my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com. I've got to send that PowerPoint presentation to my webmaster. But that way, you can play the video on YouTube. You can go to my presentation. You can click on that so that it starts. Now, you may have trouble synchronizing the lips and all that kind of stuff like that, but you'll have the PowerPoints that go with my presentation. And even if you don't want to try to synchronize those two, what you can do is that you can look at the charts and you can see the arguments that I am making. And the PowerPoints themselves will be sufficient to demonstrate to you how effectively I refuted Dr. Carrier's primary argument. Now, it will not show you how he dodged and danced. For instance, let me illustrate this. Jesus was approached by the Pharisees in Luke chapter 17, who asked him when the kingdom was going to come. Because they believed, according to Luke chapter 19, 10 and following, they believed that the kingdom was about to come immediately. So, remembering now that the Pharisees believed, the Pharisees, the Essenes, probably the normal man on the street, believed in this literalistic, materialistic, militaristic, and nationalistic restoration of the kingdom of Israel when the Messiah would come as a conquering warrior. He would whip, destroy, obliterate the Romans. So that's what the Pharisees had in mind when they came to Jesus and said, when is the kingdom coming? And Jesus said, the kingdom does not come with observation. Now look, folks, this is absolutely stunningly powerful refutation of Dr. Carrier's first, primary, and foundational argument. If Jesus did not accept, and if Jesus rejected, as a matter of fact, the common Jewish concept of the nature of the kingdom, the nature of the Messiah, then Dr. Carrier's entire argument is destroyed. So I made this argument repeatedly. The kingdom does not come with observation. I then went to John chapter 6 and 15, in which Jesus had fed the multitude of the 5,000 men. That was an incredible miracle. Now, mind you, Dr. Carrier does not believe in miracles of any kind. He just says that's a made-up story. I categorically reject that claim. But nonetheless, John chapter 6 and verse 15 says, when Jesus perceived that they were about to come and make him king, he withdrew himself. Now, I asked Dr. Carrier, Dr. Carrier, if Jesus came to establish the kind of kingdom the Jews wanted, if he came to be the kind of king the Jews wanted, why did he reject the offer? I mean, after all, if they wanted what he was offering, and he was offering what they wanted, why did he turn down the offer? Now, I went into some detail in further explicating that problem. So how did Dr. Carrier respond to that? Well, remember, in his very first argument, he said Jesus shared the common expectation of all of the Jews in the first century. So when I pointed out that no, Jesus rejected the common view, Dr. Carrier says, well, not all of the Jews believed that. Well, he made the argument in his opening statement, in his first comment. But since he realized that the point was absolutely valid, that Jesus said the kingdom does not come with observation, which refuted and rejected the Pharisees, and when Jesus rejected their kingdom offer, and their offer was of that militaristic, nationalistic kingdom, then Dr. Carrier was just simply wrong. Now, this was quite a telling point. Not only that, Dr. Carrier then began to completely ignore what I was saying. And I brought up this issue. The kingdom does not come with observation. When Jesus perceived that they were about to come and to make him king, I brought it up no less than 3 times during the debate. So Dr. Carrier ignored it. Totally ignored it after saying, well, not all the Jews believed it after all, after affirming that they did. So he goes to 1 Thessalonians 4, 1 Corinthians 15, 2 Corinthians 5, 2 Peter chapter 3. And he says, see, in these texts, Paul and Peter and John, they're all expecting a literal coming of the Lord, a literal dissolution of the cosmos, etc., etc. Well, this turned out to be problematic because I went to Isaiah chapter 64 to 66 for 2 Peter chapter 3. In Isaiah 64, 1 and 2, it says, oh, that you would come down. Oh, that you would rend the heavens, that you would shake the earth, that the mountains might quake at your presence, that the nations might tremble at your presence. The word presence there in Isaiah 64 in the Septuagint is prosopon, and it means face, it means presence. So here's Isaiah in a text in which he is, and the nation is praying for Yahweh to come. And by the way, they're wanting him to come to bring in the new creation, the new heaven and the new earth of Isaiah 65, Isaiah 66. And I've got to hurry here. I don't want to take up the whole show doing this, but I do want to share with you some of the tremendous inconsistencies and fatal contradictions that Dr. Carrier was involved in. So Isaiah 64, 1 and 2, oh, that you would come down. Lord, when you did mighty things for which we did not look, you came down. The earth shook at your presence. The mountains trembled. The nations trembled at your presence. And as fire consumes the stubble. So what do we have? We have Isaiah praying for Yahweh to come to bring in the new creation in the same way he had acted in the past. Well, guess what? Yahweh had never burned up heaven and earth before, literally, visibly, bodily, etc. He had never literally, visibly, bodily come out of heaven. And yet here's Isaiah praying for God to come and to bring in the new creation by coming as he had come in the past. So I made the following argument. In 2 Peter chapter 3, Peter was anticipating the day of the Lord in fulfillment of Isaiah 64 through 66 to bring in the new creation. But the coming of the Lord of Isaiah 64 to 66 to bring in the new creation was to be a coming of the Lord of the same nature as previous days of the Lord. All previous days of the Lord were not literal, visible, bodily, physical events. They were never God coming out of heaven, in other words, literally and visibly. Therefore, since Peter was anticipating the fulfillment of Isaiah 64 to 66, the coming of the Lord to bring in the new creation, in the same manner as Yahweh had come in the past, then that means that 2 Peter chapter 3 was not predicting the coming of the Lord at some imaginary end of time. It was not predicting the coming of the Lord out of heaven visibly, physically, and bodily. It was predicting Jesus acting in sovereign judgment against the persecutors of his people, the ungodly of 2 Peter chapter 3. Dr. Carrier did not say one single word about that argument. Instead, he wanted to talk about the passing of the elements in 2 Peter chapter 3, which I was pleased that he would. I knew that he would. And he said, look, the elements, That's the physical elements of the world. He acknowledged that it can refer to different things, but here in 2 Peter 3, it had to be referring to the physical elements of physical creation. Well, physical creation didn't burn up in AD 70, as Jesus predicted. Therefore, Jesus was wrong. I countered by pointing this out. Peter said that Paul, in all of his epistles, wrote the same things that Peter, in 2 Peter chapter 3, was saying about the day of the Lord and the destruction of the elements. And I gave a chart with all of the references in Paul, in which Paul spoke of the passing of the elements, and every single one of them had to do with the destruction of the basic elements of Old Covenant Judaism, the primary doctrines. Therefore, since Peter was looking for the same passing of the elements that Paul, in all of his epistles, talked about, and Paul, in all of his epistles, spoke of the passing of the elements of Judaism, then that must be what Peter was anticipating, the destruction of Old Covenant Israel. Well, Dr. Carrier strongly objected to that argument. He said, Peter did not say that Paul talked about the passing of the elements just like he did. Well, I knew right then and there that Dr. Carrier knew that he was in trouble. And I said, yes, Dr. Carrier, that's exactly what Peter said. He said, no. He just simply said Paul wrote other epistles. No, that is not what Peter said. So we went back and forth on that a little bit. So, okay, I grabbed my Bible. I said, let's read what the text actually says. And Peter says, our brother Paul, beloved brother Paul, in all of his epistles, speaks of these things, in which some are hard to be understood. And I said, Dr. Carrier, what is the antecedent to these things? It is the passing of the elements and the day of the Lord. I said, grammatically, that is what is demanded. He abandoned that discussion, went on to something else. That shows you the power of the simple reading of the text. Now look, there were several other really, really telling moments in the debate that I felt like really honestly carried the day. And I will say this, I've had 3 atheists contact me and say, 2 of them particularly, and to say that they were extremely impressed by the arguments that I made. One of them especially said he was going to have to relook at the evidence. The third one simply complimented my demeanor in the debate. The point here is, ladies and gentlemen, the truth of preterism stood strong in this debate. Even during the Q&A, when skeptics paid to ask their questions, preterism stood strong and stood, may I use the term, proud. Not arrogant, but proud. That's the power of the truth. Now, I understand Dr. Carrier has been giving his rendition of the debate and somewhat bragging. I don't know what he's got to brag about, quite honestly. I literally do not know. I do know that on YouTube, in the comment section, all of the comments, I say all of the comments were running like 5 to 6, 7 or 8 atheists patting him on the back. What a great guy, what a great job he did, versus Christians. And yet all that the atheists were doing were repeating his arguments that I had deflated, that I had defeated. not one of them offered a single additional word or argument to help buttress what he had said. Now, that's the last that I've read of the comments, okay? And by the way, as of this morning, at the time that I'm filming this, the viewership of the debate had reached well over 27,000 viewers. Now that's in what, week and a half, 2 weeks, maybe? That's pretty impressive. And so the truth of preterism, of covenant eschatology, is being brought before the face and the eyes of thousands upon thousands of skeptics, and for that matter, Christians who are not yet preterists. This is powerful stuff, ladies and gentlemen. It was a fantastic opportunity, and I appreciate that opportunity. Okay, that's enough. Don't have much time left for today, so let me continue. Now, I've been sharing with you over the last few videos, and again, I don't know exactly where we are at in the viewing, in the order of the videos that I had produced. Got to check with Alan on that and find out. So anyway, I've been sharing with you the concept that is found throughout the Old Testament in regard to the day of the Lord. Over and over and over again. And let me remind you of this. In the Tanakh, you find this phrase, "Then they shall know that I am the Lord." Now, 83 times, ladies and gentlemen, in the Old Testament, that phrase is used. How is it used? In what context it is used? Well, it was used in the context of the destruction of Egypt by Sargon the Assyrian. And yet that destruction, that invasion by the Assyrians, is described as Yahweh riding on a swift cloud into Egypt. Now look, Yahweh was using Assyria, Isaiah 10, 5 and following. Yahweh used Assyria as the rod in his hand, the staff of wrath, to destroy nations. Not that Assyria believed that it was Yahweh doing it. They believed it was their gods, and Yahweh said, no, that's me using him. But again, back to the point, Yahweh used the Assyrians to destroy, to conquer Egypt, and in doing so said, "Then shall they know that I am the Lord." Now, would they know that the Lord is the Lord by Yahweh literally, visibly, bodily coming out of heaven? No. They would know that Yahweh is the Lord because his prophet foretold the event. Before it happened, and when it came to happen, they knew it was Yahweh keeping his word. And I've shared with you example after example after example of Yahweh saying, they will see this and they will know that. And folks, it's difficult. It's really difficult to overestimate the importance of this concept of seeing this and knowing that. Because that's what those Old Testament passages, all 83 of them, are teaching us. That men would be able to see physical events in their world. Events foretold by Yahweh's prophets. And when those events came to pass, they could know that Yahweh was present. It was his prosopon. It was his parousia. Folks, do you catch the power of that? I've shared with you, and this is critical. In the Septuagint, the word prosopon means presence. It is often translated as face because, face is presence. Okay? So, by seeing the physical event of the destruction of this nation or that nation, etc., they knew it was the presence of Yahweh. And they would know that He is the Lord. Now then, I'm only going to be able to introduce this. This same concept is found in regard to Jesus's parousia. It is the greatest theological tragedy in history that the early church became Hellenized at such an early state, and that the Hebrews had already become Hellenized, so that by the time the church was established, Gentiles, Hellenists, began to come into the church and to influence the church, made up almost 100% by that time of Jews. Hellenized Jews nonetheless, at least to a great extent. So what happened? Well, many scholars, Tom Holland, Snyder, Wright, on and on, take note of the fact that due to this Hellenization of the church itself, language that should never have been taken literally all of a sudden began to be interpreted literally. In other words, the language of Yahweh coming out of heaven so that men might know that He is God and that is His presence began to be understood literally instead of metaphorically. I'm out of time. I'll see you next week.